My name is Dee. My pronouns are they and them. I am one of the co-founders for Inclusive Agile. If you're here, you probably know a little bit about me or Inclusive Agile. But to do a really quick recap, we are a nonprofit focused on building psychologically safe organizations through the practice of doing so. And so we'll actually be kind of covering what that looks like today. Our focus is how we, today is going to be how we use Agile specifically as a method of delivering psychological safety, but also enjoying and expanding what that looks like for with inclusion. So as you can see from my beautiful, well, we'll be going through a really, really fun presentation. Please, as we're going through, throw comments in here wherever you are. Those comments can pop up in here, and I would love to engage with them. So please, I'd love to be able to have a conversation, challenge me, or add your personal stories if you feel welcome to do so. If you want to know more about Inclusive Agile, just follow us on LinkedIn, as well as our website, which is inclusiveagile.io. Without further ado, let's jump into the presentation. Again, we're leading the fourth wave of Agile with inclusion. Before I jump into what that actually means, again, a little bit about me. My background, I graduated from the University of Utah, not in 1850, but a long time ago. My degree is in gender studies with a minor in computer science. And I have been passionate about creating safe spaces since early 2006, when I created one of the first World of Warcraft guilds and the first World of Warcraft guild on my server as an openly positive LGBTQ space. Which back in 2006 was really difficult to do. We had moderator issues and lots of other things that made it a little bit more complicated than it would be now. And where I've really taken that as I built those spaces and ran into those conflicts is I brought that through my whole life. So you can blame World of Warcraft for this presentation. But yeah, a few things that I've taken out of that. I've started this nonprofit with a number of other really amazing people. One of those is Brandy Barker, who will be producing today. So thank you, Brandy, for your work. And then I also ran for office last year for Utah House of Representatives District 44. I didn't win, so I'm not currently a representative, but it was a great experience to show a number of people what it can look like to be non-binary in public. So that's a little bit about me. Let's jump into what really kicked off taking this into a whole business. My ideas of how to create safe spaces was when I came across this quote as I was trying to improve the Agile practices of one of my clients. And it's this: if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men and women to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. This is not a direct quote, so I don't mind editing it a little bit there. But the goal here is really recognizing that we all, at our core, want to reach towards a vision. We want to be able to feel like we're creating impact in a positive way towards some goal or end that we are excited about. And so this really showed that it wasn't about trying to tell people how to do DEI. It was about creating the space where they want to do DEI better. Excuse me. Delicious water. So let's talk about what the fourth wave of Agile actually is, because I said I was going to. The fourth wave of Agile follows the first three waves. Imagine that. First wave was Agile for Teams. This was back in 2000. We had XP, Extreme Programming. We had Scrum. We had Kanban. but it was very much focused on teams and specifically software engineer teams. Excuse me. We moved to that grew to recognizing, hey, how do you build much larger systems? And so Agile grew to cover Agile at scale. There's a number of scaling frameworks out there. We are framework agnostic, but again, we recognize that need. Then we realized we could only be as agile as the larger organization around us. And so the agility and the practices of agility moved towards business agility, where the whole organization understands what agile means, how to practice on a daily basis, and how to deliver regular small bits of value, so you know exactly what kind of value you're building. And so this is where I'm introducing inclusion, or inclusive agility, if you will. And I'll explain a whole lot why throughout this whole thing, but a little preview is recognizing all Agile, the ability to be able to deliver and reflect and improve, requires feedback, requires the ability for us to deliver positive or negative feedback. So you can't do that without inclusion. And I'll explain why as we go through the fourth wave of Agile. So I've separated the fourth wave of Agile into four pillars. Our pillars start with psychological safety. And it's that idea that I have the ability, because I yearn for the vast and endless sea, to be able to give feedback on how to build a better ship, or simply how to build a better helm, whatever it may be. And so we'll dive into that, and then we'll cover DEI. We'll give a little bit of a review of DEI. We'll jump into systems thinking, which is one of the more complex pieces of what we help organizations understand, the complexity of systems. And then we'll do a review of Agile. And please stop me at any time by throwing comments in here. I'll jump onto those comments and respond as quickly as I can. All right, let's talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety is the concept, is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas or questions or concerns. I love this particular quote, and I love how it ends. It's a shared expectation by members of an organization that they can take interpersonal risks without fear of negative consequences. That sounds really, really broad and kind of abstract. So I wanted to kind of dive into an example that I am in love with, that I think really helps understand what psychological safety means. So we're going to be chatting. I'm going to go through really quick what I have adapted from The Invisible Knapsack from Peggy McIntosh. And that's the invisible psychologically safe laptop bag. So as I go through this, I'm going to be listing a number of experiences that we could be having at work. And the goal here is that the idea is that you're carrying around your laptop bag. And every time I say one of these experiences, if you feel like this isn't an experience, this isn't something that can happen at your particular place of work or organization or home, wherever you may be looking for psychological safety, then you put a rock in that bag. And so every time I say one of these, if you just imagine, obviously you don't need to go out and grab some rocks, but imagine every time you throw a rock into your laptop bag. So let's start. My ideas and suggestions are valuable in the organization, regardless of my position. So, if I'm down as a QA, or if I am if I'm running the front desk, I still have the ability to talk about the direction of our organization, what it means to me, and shape the vision. If you can't do that, put a rock in your laptop bag. My feedback is valued without being seen as self-serving. It's pretty clear. It's not, I want to make this happen because it benefits directly me, but because I think it's important for maybe people like me, or just as a way to extend the values of our whole organization so it aligns with my own. It's not self-serving, that helps align on vision. So if you can't do that, put another rock in. I can expect that my organization will not challenge my feedback because no one else is bothered by this. So I've seen this a number of times, especially with people that are from a marginalized community that might say, hey, this is kind of an issue. Can we talk about this? And it gets turned around that no one else in the organization actually cares about this, regardless of whether or not that's actually true. That's the pushback. And so can't do that, put another rock in your laptop bag. I understand that the risks I take are supported throughout the execution of that risk. I'll keep going a little bit faster too. And please throw up questions. Again, we want to discuss this. Drop your thoughts in the chat. This is one of my favorite parts. So as I'm going through this, I'd love to hear what you think. If there's other rocks that we could add in here. I know my failures will not become part of my work identity. I'm sure other people have experienced that. I can show empathy for others without being labeled as virtue signaling. We can recognize that something doesn't have to just impact us in order to be something that we're passionate about changing. I can expect my peers to provide me feedback intended to understand and grow and not punish. Or sometimes I like to just say, not follow the way things are supposed to be. My team and I know our results are a collaborative effort and not the results of an individual's heroics. I can provide feedback to leadership regarding their habits and behaviors. That's a hard one. And it's one that I think every single leader that I've ever talked to wants to happen. They want to hear feedback, but they often behave or perform or react in ways to feedback that creates a lack of psychological safety, a lack of trust. And so they don't get that feedback. And sometimes we're just scared because we've experienced it before. I can make a mistake in my interaction with someone and be given the opportunity to learn and not be personally labeled with an ism. There's been a number of things as I've made my journey and continue to make my journey to understand and become more culturally competent around more than just the dominant culture, that I've said things and done things that were part of the culture that I was raised in, that I learned later were had some really problematic origins, as well as continued usages to this day. And so understanding that, instead of someone saying I'm racist or I'm sexist or whatever it may have been, it turns into an opportunity for me to understand that that action can bring up racism. It can impact people to think that I am no longer a safe place for them to talk about their experiences. I believe my leaders are honest and will communicate their own failures to model vulnerability and trust. I want to take just a second on this one because it's one our organization recently had. Our Inclusive Agile itself had our own kind of exploration around what transparency means. And to give an example, or to kind of expand it, it's really this understanding that you are going to make mistakes as a leader. And the best thing to do is not to try to find the way to deliver that mistake as softly as possible. It's to deliver that mistake as humbly and vulnerably as possible. And being able to do so then creates the ability for people to be vulnerable with you. So I really love this one. This builds off of the Speed of Trust book written locally here, which actually a lot of stuff here in Utah has come out of Utah in the Agile movement, and as well as in business. But that was from Covey. I love this question. What if I have all the rocks? I love this because it's often the case that you look through this list and you go, I don't think I can do any of this. And yet we still show up to work. And that's because we can, right? All of these things get in the way of doing our best work, But we've all learned to adapt. We are amazingly adaptive creatures. We've learned to adapt in that environment. But that means we're also not bringing the best ideas up. We're not even bringing bad ideas up because we're afraid of what that might seem to us. Despite that, that might open up a conversation to send us somewhere else. So if you have all the rocks, recognize first, you're probably not alone in the rest of your organization. But it's also just a good time to recognize that this would be a good time to provide that feedback to your organization. Not that they're wrong on different things, but that you don't feel psychologically safe to give feedback in the organization. Okay, Brett, how would it be if leaders could show that they can make mistakes and grow? Hiding honest mistakes causes rippling issues, especially in safety. This is I love this one because it's when we talk about transparency, I think you really are hitting on that transparency piece for me. It's that understanding that I'm in a space and I'm going to say things as a leader. And if my answer is I don't want other people to read that because they may misunderstand me, that's an issue where you don't trust your people. And in turn, they can't trust you because they know you're not going to be honest with your actual feelings and things because you're afraid of being judged. Psychological safety is recognizing that we need to create an organizational judgment-free zone, if you will, so that I can make those mistakes as a leader and expect that the feedback I get, because people are really upset about whatever just happened, are things that I'm going to actually take into account and accommodate as best as I can. So there's our invisible laptop bag. So I'd love for you to just actually think about what would it be like if we were having this conversation and you were walking from the parking lot to your place of work. How heavy your backpack, laptop bag might be. Okay. This is a great question. Can we throw up Jonathan's question here? It is possible to stop providing feedback after not having reaped any benefits from past feedback that has benefited the company. Yes, we'll cover this a little bit when we get into systems thinking, but our reactions are not because we choose to be bad people, because we choose to be distrusting. It's that we live and react to systems that create levels of distrust and experiences where we take those forward into every interaction that we have in the future. And again, I'll dive more into that as we understand, but I really appreciate that comment. Thank you, Jonathan. You're absolutely right. A lot of what's happening are responses to experiences we've already had. And sometimes that's not even the experience you've had in that organization, but that doesn't mean it doesn't follow you around. All right, let's talk about DEI. So we're going to jump in really quick. Inclusion and diversity. I want to kind of talk about these at a high level. We've seen exclusion. We know what exclusion looks like. I'm not going to jump into this. We've all, gone through and understood some of our own history here in the States as well as other places. We also have understood what segregation looks like. And so I won't dive into how difficult that was for people that were segregated. I want to talk about the experiences we have most often in regards to being included. Most of the time, most organizations sit in this space. They don't sit in the exclusive space or even the segregation space because they would probably feel very, very guilty for doing so. But what often happens is that an organization adopts an amount of diversity. Diversity is just different types of people. As you bring those different types of people in, a lot of times those people are then lumped together, either under the same sort of role, like an entry-level role, or the same sort of work, care work versus maybe hands-on work, or they're literally brought together as a group in order to understand how to interact with them as a group, as opposed to as individuals. And we'll talk a lot about how that can run into some problems with feedback. But in the end, what it comes down to is all of our purple dots interact with that whole group of diverse people as a single group. And they say these are all the people that need they need special treatment, or snowflakes, whatever you may call it. When in reality, a lot of times what's happening is as they try and give feedback, it challenges the purple status quo. And in that space creates fear by the larger purple organization. And so they then continue to create larger separations in that integration space. So moving from integration, what we're trying to help organizations create is the understanding of inclusion. And the thing that I want to kind of show here is not that it looks like Wonder Bread, which is totally by accident, but that when you spread the people around into the actual spaces that they exist in, they then can, as they communicate with the circles around them, they change those circles a little bit. They actually create more understanding and higher levels of resilience across the entire organization as you have the ability to understand feedback from an individual instead of from a group. And that's one of the biggest issues we have with corporate DEI is it's how do I create safe spaces for Black people? How do I know how to hire Asian women? Whatever it may be, it's grouping people together instead of actually treating them as individuals, which are not necessarily terrible things. I want to talk about the E in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like this is an area that a lot of people get a little kind of tripped up on. Equity is understanding that we have value when we show up to a space and are able to contribute as much as others in that space based on our individual needs. And I love this particular picture to show that off. And it's pretty obvious here. You have 3 foxes. You have a really tall fox. You have a nice medium-sized fox. And then you have a fox in a wheelchair. And if you said, hey, we want to treat everyone equally, oh, they're all standing behind this fence trying to watch what I assume is a soccer game. Maybe it's rugby. If we give all of them the same thing to be able to view that soccer game, only 2 people of the 3 benefit. And the first person didn't need it in the first place. They could have seen already. So we've expended resources on providing things for someone that doesn't need it, while not expended resources on someone that does need it. So equity is about understanding the way different people show up to work. We do a lot of coaching around neurodivergence. It's one of the places that a lot of people are trying to improve and understand. How do I actually create a space where my autistic or people with ADHD can come in and contribute without needing to feel overloaded? And there's been some really great conversations we've had recently, one with Google, about how their CTO has a level of neurodivergence, and they've accommodated the way that he shows up to work. And now to the point where he is one of the best workers there, moved up to CTO, and drives a great organization because they created the equity for him to show up. All right, moving on along. Okay, this is where it gets a little scary, right? A lot of people say, inclusion, again, is for people that just need to kind of pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But what we found since the 80s and 70s, when we really started to say, hey, we need to create better spaces for women at work. We need to understand how to create better outcomes from divorce. And we will, all of those things that kind of hit at us, as we made those more fair for the marginalized communities, it also began to benefit the non-marginalized community. And so, for example, one of my very favorite examples is actually divorce. It used to be that it was very clear what would happen with divorce. Women would usually not have any means to be able to support themselves and their children. Their children would often come with them. And the men would have everything that they built before based on the labor of the women that supported them. As we sought equality between those two different experiences, we also noticed that the more people, that divorces became more equal. We saw more challenges in court elevating the results of men in that space than necessarily of women, especially around childcare. It is now pretty standard and common across all 50 states here in the United States that if you get divorced, you default get joint custody. And if you want something other than joint custody, you have to prove really, really hard in lots of different ways why you deserve to take your kid away from the other person. And it can't just be because I was the main caretaker. Cool. Now you're two different people. You're going to have to do different things. This came about and also benefited women because now they had additional expectation from men, which sometimes they didn't have a great time meeting, but additional expectation of men to be caretakers, to be able to take care of their kids so that women could work and men could work. So in that way, men have benefited. And in the way that men benefited, women in turn benefited from that. So it's really a positive reinforcement cycle as we build inclusion for marginalized communities. It builds inclusion for everyone's experiences. And I want to specifically hit people with disabilities because I like to say that people with disabilities is the core of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's not about if you're disabled, it's about when you will become disabled, and understanding how you're going to be able to work within the community that you are in when that happens, as you get old, as you age, and you can't react to things as quickly, or you're more fragile because we get brittler bones. If we've already created space for people that were experiencing that when they were young, you now get to take advantage and benefit from those things as you grow older. Okay, now I want to kind of cover a few common experiences within diversity, equity, inclusion. This is to kind of give us some ideas of things we can start with. But as we move into systems thinking, I want us to very much recognize that there is no roadmap, there is no plan, there's no structure or framework you can apply to create an inclusive organization. It is about daily practice. And we'll get into that again a little bit. But I do want to kind of give some people some ways to view and understand how well it's going in your own organization. So common inclusion roadblocks, believing that inclusion is a responsibility of someone else, whether that's the diversity, equity, inclusion chief or the people or HR representatives. They don't create an inclusive team. They can't. I can't come in and create a psychologically safe experience for you and your team if I'm not part of your team. So it can't come from somewhere else. It has to come from us, every single one of us. Accepting intolerance and harm as just an opinion. I won't dive too far into this because it's very personal for me, but it is recognized that the paradox of tolerance is that you must be intolerant to intolerance in order to have a tolerant society. So yes, people can just have an opinion, but if that opinion is creating negative impacts throughout the organization, that's something that needs coaching. And that leads into this third one, excusing harmful behavior. That's just the way they are. I like to lean into the Me Too movement, which I like to just say the no more bullshit movement. Sorry for the language, kind of. Which is, hey, this person did something, and instead of saying, well, that's just the way that they are, there's accountability for the pain and difficulty that particular action has. And we can get all into some more of that, and I would love to, because it's really, really a fun space to chat about. But we're going to keep moving on. Lack of training and accountability on receiving feedback. I leave this one last because last the best of all the game. And that's really the drive of what we are looking for in terms of feedback. There is no perfect way to give feedback. because everyone shows up to that feedback experience different than everybody else, right? I prefer feedback out in the open in front of everyone else as soon as I make a mistake, because it gives me the opportunity to model being contrite, seeking better understanding, and learning and growing in that space. But others may not have that understanding or acceptance or goal personally. And so public feedback can be very damaging to their trust of you in the future. Boom. Common inclusion milestones. So these are some of the things that you can see are going well in an organization, and that they're on the path. I want to show that this is on the path. This does not mean that you're an inclusive organization, because these things happen. It means you're on the path. First, organizationally recognized holidays. They're also important to the team. This is the understanding that, yes, we're going to have some holidays that the whole organization are going to have off. Great. We're not going to take off every holiday from every country, from every person that's represented, because I don't think we would work very much. But those people do get to have that in whatever way makes the most sense for them to celebrate that particular experience. Recognition of men as parental figures. So some of the things you might see in here are things like having changing rooms in, or changing stations in the men's restroom and not just in the women's restroom. Having paternity leave or overall parental leave. And I would like to also expand this in this moment to other parental figures. I have talked to and spoken with a number of people that are currently or have raised their younger siblings, and how, because of their age, they couldn't actually get the benefits that someone else may have as a caretaker that is what we might have considered a normal guardian of the time. This one's the kicker here: being unafraid of confronting structures based in exclusion. Dress codes. Dress codes are one of my very favorite things to talk about, because there hasn't been a time that we haven't used it to limit and separate different people from either their own personal identity or from each other. Women must wear skirts, or you may not have any facial tattoos, which itself, we recognize there are a number of cultures throughout the world that part of their culture is getting a facial tattoo. Hair discrimination. I'm going to include this one with the beard requirements as well. Recognizing how difficult it has been for Black people to show up to work with their natural hair, that they would have to do certain levels of treatment that would often destroy the quality of their hair in order to be able to show up to work in an acceptable way. And what I mean by acceptable is really this last line down here. Who is centered? When we create dress codes or any of these particular policies, who's centered in that policy? If I'm supposed to show up into work with a suit jacket and a tie and a button-down shirt, who does that represent? What culture, what group of people feels that that's the way that you should show up to places? You could say white people, you could say wealthy people, but you certainly can't say people from India necessarily, because what they're looking for in terms of respect looks very, very different than what we may be looking for in terms of respect, or even comfort. A lot of times I hear people say, well, we want people to feel comfortable walking into our office. Cool. Which people? White people? Or if someone shows up with face tattoos, are they going to feel more comfortable if they see someone that also has face tattoos? Or are they going to feel more comfortable when they don't have those things? It really depends on the person, but the point kind of stands that they're centering in these policies that then excludes other types of values and cultures. All right. We're going to be taking a break here in just a minute. Let me get through another couple of slides. But this is the culmination of what I've really been getting at throughout this inclusion space, is that it's the responsibility of every single one of us, right? No matter where you are on a team, if you are, whether you're doing quality assurance, whether you're doing legal, whatever you're doing, it's your responsibility to create psychologically safe experiences for your team, because it's not anyone else's experience or responsibilities. So with that, again, it's not about doing things right. It's about teaching people how to accept feedback, how to understand that as I challenge the way that you just interacted, I'm not challenging your identity, I'm challenging your action. And if you believe your actions are your identity, that's going to be a problem for sure. But that's not my problem, that's your problem. And we want to separate those things so that you can receive feedback, understand the impact that you've had, despite the fact that it may be missing from your intention. Because intention is not a magic bullet. If I accidentally shoot someone and I intended to shoot someone else, I still shot that person, and it's still terrible. And we still need to fix that problem. So I like to lump psychological safety and diversity, equity, inclusion as the outcomes that you get from practicing from practicing inclusive agility. And from that, you get teams that can self-heal. All right, now may be a really great time to take a break before we jump into systems thinking, and just ask or remind everyone, we are a nonprofit. We are looking for donations for being able to run things like this, and being able to provide it at no cost, as well as our programs that we're building for 2024. We're looking to provide at no cost as well, a 2-day training where we dive further into each of these things and give you all the tools and understanding to be able to take inclusive agility into your own organization. So if you have the means to donate and you like what we're doing with our mission, please do so, because we love doing this and we want to keep doing it, and we don't want to have to continue to drain our 401ks. All right, jumping in, now that we got that sponsor moment out of the way, what is a system? So we're going to jump into systems thinking. And there's a lot of stuff out there, and I highly, highly recommend, regardless of whether you're in software or not, that you read this book, Management 3.0. The first 12 pages are some of the best explanations of systems thinking that I've ever seen. So jump into that if you want to learn more, or again, reach out. I love talking about this space, and I'd love to be able to support you in your growth there. So what is a system? A system is a group of parts that work together to achieve a common goal. So we have three really simple elements of a system. We have many parts. They are related to each other, and in that relationship, they drive towards a common goal. This is still pretty abstract, so I want to jump in and give a couple of examples with some types of systems. Now, the first one is a stapler. A stapler has many parts. They're made of different things. They each do different things. And together, they staple papers. This is what we like to call a simple system. Simple systems don't mean, ultimately just means it's easy to understand how the parts are put together, how you could take those parts apart and put them back together so it can still work. So it's an understandable system, but the key definition here is that the system does not change as you use it. It may wear down, pieces might fall apart, but the system doesn't adapt to its use. It doesn't start saying, wow, I've noticed you only, put 2 papers together at a time, so I'm going to give you smaller staples. Or you like to, you have a hard time because you're trying to pierce through 150 pages. I'll give you a stronger space and more staples. You have to go find a different simple system to be able to do different things with it. So for every A input, you should expect the same B output if the system is working. The next kind of system I want to cover, calculators or complicated systems. Complicated systems are a lot like simple systems in that, again, for every 2 plus 2, you get a 4, and you should not expect it to ever give you anything besides that. And what makes it complicated is that you open up a calculator either now or 50 years ago, and you would have a hard time understanding exactly how it works unless you either understood the computer itself that's running it and could see the code, you understand electrical gates and all of those things. You wouldn't be able to understand it without some work. But in the end, you would be able to map it out. You would have the ability to understand the whole system because every part of the system expects to be able to respond in the same way every single time. I like to also, because my background is software, large architectures, large background or back-end architectures are generally complicated systems because when I call an API, when I call to get some information, I should expect that if I do that again, I should get the same information. If I send the same information, I should get the same information, or an expected, right? Computers are a little bit more advanced than just a standard calculator, but in the end, you could understand how every single piece of that architecture works together. So finally, I want to talk about where we sit as people, as Foxen. We are complex systems, and complex systems change that script on predictability. In complex systems, I can't expect to give the same inputs today as tomorrow and expect the exact same results, because the person that you are tomorrow is different than the person that you are today. Your values have changed. What's important has changed because maybe you've solved a bunch of things at home and you're feeling really good, or maybe new things have shown up that are causing you stress. Whatever it is, you have new experiences and you've adapted to those experiences. And that adaptation means that new experiences are now influenced by those past experiences. So complex systems are ultimately really simply impossible to predict because they continually adapt to themselves. And what makes them extra complex is that complex systems are made up of smaller complex systems all of the time. I like to use our human body. We're a big complex system. You can't change one thing without something else reacting to that thing in our bodies. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Otherwise, I'm going to spend 45 minutes just talking about how our bodies work as complex systems. But we do recognize our cells are themselves adapting to the cells around them, to the blood they receive or don't receive, to the trigger of a cancer cell versus not. All of those things are adapting to the actual experience around them. I wanted to leave some space here to, again, have some comments. So I'd love to hear if we say that complex systems are adaptive systems, then we can say a team itself is a complex system. And as a complex system being made up of smaller complex systems, other humans, how do we start trying to interact with teams in ways that are ultimately not helpful? So pretty good example that I like to start with, but please, if you have comments, throw them up in here, is the pizza party. Cool. The pizza party is as a response to doing some heroics. This is something that's been common in software engineering as well as other organizations where leadership asks for heroics. They ask for people to spend more hours, to work harder, to be able to get somewhere. And then they say, we'll give you this thing. And the first time this happens, sometimes we go, yeah, that's fine. And we respond to that with positivity because we all came together and we delivered something. But if we do that every month or every 6 months, we have to spend extra hours at the office, and the only thing we get in return is a pizza party, the efficacy of that thing changes because our experience of that thing changes. So again, if you're throwing something in there, I will talk about it. I'm going to continue to move on because we're hitting towards the end here, and I have so many other things to talk about. So please throw your stories in there and we'll jump in. And so I want to talk about communication within a complex system. Feedback is what drives that communication. It's not someone saying, I want to know how you're doing. It's someone saying, here's how I'm doing. And then the rest of the system responding to that knowledge. And so imagine how difficult it might be to respond to the information from a group of people or from an individual if they're segregated from everyone else. If instead their experiences have to be conglomerated with the other people like them and then be challenged and then be adapted to, you're not going to actually hear the actual feedback from that person that would help them do a better day-to-day job. That's what we're ultimately looking for, because employees are often the most expensive piece of our organization, as well as the thing that is going to create your success. Okay, here's one from Brett. Year-end evals. You get a bunch of data after it is valuable, get assigned a number that will define you in the organization for the rest of your career, or at least the rest of that year, and then get no other feedback about your improvements or how you may have changed for 12 months, which then all you're really doing is gathering uncontextualized data from the first 10 months since your last eval. And then the only thing you're really measuring and talking about is the last couple of months, which is great because that's the person that you are right now. And that's the person that they need to have the best feedback for. But that's not how we actually approach it. We approach it like the whole year, this is how you've been performing. So moving forward, again, imagine what it would look like for feedback within a fully inclusive organization. Looking at one of these red circles and understanding that they don't have to convince all of the purple circles on how to be better people to someone like them. They have to interact with the people closest to them to create a safe space for those interactions. And in that way, that creates a ripple effect throughout the rest of the organization of understanding of just how to do better for anyone, how to listen to feedback. And that's what inclusive agility really lands on, is the understanding of accepting feedback. But in order to accept feedback, we have to have a growth mindset. I'm not going to go through all these again, because we're running low on time, but a fixed mindset is something that a lot of us have been raised in. My particular culture has a very heavy reliance on the gifts you were given, or the talents you have that have been given to you that you then use for the rest of your life, which then often leads to us searching for these talents of things that we are supposed to be able to just naturally do well. When in reality, we're adaptive systems. We're not a static system. And with an adaptive system, we recognize then that every single thing we do, every single thing we believe and our values can change through practice. They can be challenged through understanding and intention. So growth mindset comes down to, I have a desire to learn, to constantly improve, and understand that failures are gifts to us to understand the world around us in a way that we didn't understand it before. And in the end, growth mindset builds the skill of safety. So crafting that culture of feedback means that you need, again, to focus on receiving feedback as more important than learning how to do feedback good. Because again, everyone receives feedback in a different way. And then again, feedback's a gift. However it's given, you have the ability to understand, I've created impact I may not have intended. And that may be very much filtered and viewed through that particular person's experiences, but now I understand that interaction better, and I can create a healthier relationship with that. We're going to skip the question and we're going to keep going because I want to hit where Agile sits in. We're finally at the last part of our name, inclusive Agile. Lots of people here because a lot of our network is software, but Agile is not a system for software. Agile is an understanding on how to deliver work. It's a mindset more than a framework. I like to say Agile is the practice of practice. It creates a small understanding of how to deliver quickly so that you can understand how that delivery impacted the people you intended to impact, how it impacted the people you didn't intend to impact, so that you can learn from those things and do better the next time. So my favorite space to go to understand Agile at that heart without being caught up in Scrum frameworks or Kanban frameworks is Alistair Coburn's The Heart of Agile, which really hits these four things. We collaborate because we can't deliver anything alone anymore. We deliver. We have to regularly be putting what we're making in front of the people that we're making it for. And then with that, we reflect on not only our performance, but on that impact that we made with our delivery. And then we have the time, space, and focus to improve to the point where the improvement of our daily work is more important than the doing of our daily work. And I love that one, and I love people that challenge me on it. But we're going to keep going. So with the combination of systems thinking, this understand that everyone changes all of the time, and the idea of practice, we can now have teams that can self-organize, because it's not about the fact that they've done something wrong and so they no longer have, they're no longer good at being a team. It's they now have not just the tools, but the space to take the time to understand that failure and grow together as a system of people. So all of these concepts are ultimately pulled together. Agile is the practice of delivering whatever it is you're delivering. And in our focus, it's the delivery of psychological safety. In order to deliver that psychological safety, people need to understand what equity and inclusion ultimately means. And in order to be able to do that, they need to understand that systems change, that people are not static creatures, and that we don't rely on biases that are built into our brains for survival in order to make decisions, that instead we look at the systems as wholes and listen to the feedback in order to move forward. And that's how we actually create agile teams, is with inclusion, with systems thinking. So I would love to hear more of your stories. I've only left 6 minutes. So please, if you have something, I'd love to jump into one. But you can also follow us on LinkedIn, jump in and comment on our page there, and let us know, what are some experiences you've had that have been positive in psychological safety, where you have seen a leader be vulnerable with an organization, or that someone was vulnerable with a leader and was rewarded for that feedback, was rewarded for it instead of punished for it. Follow us as well, because we love to chat with you and we love to show you all the cool things we're working on. And ultimately, I love you all. Even if I don't know you, I know that you are a system of beautiful experiences that have crafted the person you are today and will continue to craft new people that you will become in the future. Thank you, everybody. Again, please scan that up there at the top left to donate whatever you can. Again, we are a nonprofit. We do whatever we can to try and provide as many of our services at no cost as possible. And I hope to be able to hear some of your stories and share them with the rest of our community. Thank you very much for your time. I haven't seen anything else come in. I'll give it another couple minutes. I hope that was helpful. And I hope that you have questions or thoughts or concerns. But in the end, I hope you recognize this is not going to help you. This is going to give you context, but the only thing that is going to help you create a psychologically safe environment is intention and practice. We have to practice. We would love to help you practice. So please reach out if you want to see these kinds of experiences at your workplace. Scan to donate. We do like to come in and do organizational trainings, all the way to just, I love coming to, we just did Zions Bank's Innovation Week and had a really great time talking to people about their organization and the transformations they're going through. So please, we'd love to continue to do this work. And thank you very, very much for your time today. Really, I understand for this last hour, you could have been doing 100,000 other things, from napping to basket weaving. There's a lot of other things that you could be doing with your time, and you gave that time to me. And I honor and am just blown away by that. So thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful December. Enjoy the holidays that you may celebrate. And may you find safety in the spaces around you.